3, 2, 1.
Hello. For the ones who are in France, we are at Belco. We guess there is a lot of coffee professionals on the other side. We are really happy and honored to welcome you to the third and last conversation of our master classes. Today, I'm very honored to have different coffee professionals with different backgrounds in different countries, starting from Emilio Lopez, producer and exporter of specialty coffee since many years. He's from El Salvador. Estela Pitti and her daughter named Estela also. They are from Panama. It's the first year that Belco is going to work with them, but they have huge experience in specialty coffee. And David Maguta, which is the exporter and producer from Kenya. That is the second year in a row that we work with him, and we are proud to talk about his naturals. And of course, Jacques, which is our head director in Addis Abeba, with a lot of experience in many aspects of coffee, but of course, natural coffee also. I think Estela has a little introduction of her farm and work. And hello, Estela, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. So pleased to be here.
Please go ahead.
All right.
Am I able to share the screen for me?
I think you can.
Oh, it says it's not allowed participants to share.
Do you really need to share the screen?
No. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning from Finca Los Cenizos. We are Panamanian specialty coffee producers, members of Specialty Coffee Association of Panama, and participants in the Best of Panama contest since 2018. Finca Los Cenizos is a family-owned estate located in the mountains of Cerro Punta, southwest of Panama. It's a beautiful canyon surrounded by exotic flora and fauna. Our plantations date back to 2008 and start at an altitude or 1,800 meters above sea level up to 2,500 meters. 70% of our plantation is dedicated to the production of geisha variety, and 30% Catuai and Pacamara. Natural process. Currently, we process our coffee on the farm. 60% wash and 40% natural coffee. Both processes are performed by artisanal way by 99 Nove Bougle workforce. Our batches are dry in African beds in the sun for at least 6 weeks. By natural process, we refer the method involving the drying coffee of cherries in drying beds without extracting the pulp. These natural process methods offers more fruity flavors and fuller body, as being stays in contact with the pulp longer. Being in a region surrounded by mountains with high humidity levels makes it more challenging to achieve ideal humidity and of 11% for coffee. We usually start drying outdoors and then pass the coffee to other beds, greenhouses, where we are really less on constant changing environmental conditions such as ones we perceive in the tropics. The result of natural coffee process has been able to position our coffee in different international markets, such as Asia and Middle East, where consumers are constantly looking for coffees with high complexity and unique flavors. one of the challenge producers face when processing natural coffee is being able to offer a cup that, despite not being washed, remains clean and harmonious with aim of all the native flavors of the region and the terroir. And that's take me to one challenge that it's being able to offer my coffee. And at the end of my presentation, I would like to thank Belco for inviting me to share some of my work on natural coffee and learn from all of you. Please free to ask me any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very interesting that Estela is quite describing what is to dry a coffee with full cherry, and that it's well known as a natural processed coffee. Before to start the talk, we were discussing, and Emilio was quite interested or explaining us a little bit the history of the processing coffee. I think you can go ahead with that, Emilio.
Excellent. Well, go ahead.
Just to maybe to start, in order to explain what we consider natural coffee, will be interesting. And if you can do that for us, I'm sure you are the right person to do it.
Well, thank you, Cesar, and thank you, Belco, and welcome everyone. And it's an honor to be here right next to Estela, David, or both Estelas, David, Jacques, and you, Cesar, and the whole team of Belco. Thank you for inviting me to speak specifically about naturals. Naturals is a topic that I've been involved in for the last almost 20 years. And I have been able to travel to different countries, producing countries, and I've seen how everyone has, started to do different processes. And I think to start talking about natural processing, it's important to go back and to understand where did this process come from. And it actually, it's actually how we started to process coffee. The consumption of coffee dates back to the 8th century, so like 1850. That's when it was early recorded that coffee was consumed, and then early recordings of processing and a little more of a little bit of trade started happening back in the 1500s, as far as I understand. And then obviously this is all happening in Ethiopia. So coffee, as it is a natural, fruit, in order to consume the seed that is within the fruit, you need to dry it out. And again, in Ethiopia, where Arabica coffee comes from, the tradition was to dry the coffee, and it is still the tradition to dry the coffee with the full cherry, without even processing anything, but going from the plant directly to a raised bed, direct sun, and then roast it, grind it, and and obviously consume the seed that is within. It was until the late 1900s when coffee started to get depulped. When coffee was brought into the Americas and into the European colonies, coffee was still processed naturally. It wasn't until, again, so the early 1800s, when coffee got disseminated across the European colonies, it was all being naturally processed. It wasn't until the mid 1800s, 1870, 1890, that Central America and parts of South America started to explore on how to remove the skin because of a less risk of losing or damaging the fruit, and also reduced the time of coffee being dried. So as you all know, coffee takes almost twice as long to dry with the skin than just with the parchment. So it became, the reason that we started depulping coffee again was because of risk. Coffee, once it's dry on patios, as we dry it in Central America or South America, if it's rained on when it's in full skin, the risk of damaging the cup of that coffee is pretty high. And with the volumes that were produced, it was just too much for the patios to take. So we started depulping also because it created a different profile of a cup. It's a much cleaner, typically, a much low, that's why it's called mild coffees or mild washed. That's the classification we give to coffee of the trade, because that is what Central America and South America became, the washed milds. So then that's what happened in all of Latin America and parts of Africa for the last 100 years, pretty much. It wasn't until the 2000s when a lot of roasters and a lot of farmers started traveling across the world and seeing how to borrow ideas of processing and bring them back to our countries. How did that affect the cup? In my case, it was in 2003 that I was actually visited by Enrico Meschini from La Plantación de Café, who back then I was only like 24 years old, long time ago. But he was asking me, whatever happened to the naturals that El Salvador produced 80 years ago? Naturals from El Salvador? Yeah, my grandfather and my father used to come to El Salvador and buy great naturals, for our espresso in Italy. It was such an important component. And immediately I started thinking, well, if this is how coffee was processed back then, why not try it out? So I started trying out naturals back in 2004. So I've been, playing around on processing not only naturals in general since 2004. So with that in mind, I'm going to probably hand it off. I'm going to start talking and hopefully share also or hear some other experiences from other farmers. But I think it was important to bring back where this idea of depulping coffee came from.
Very interesting what you're saying. And then I would like to link what you're saying because Jacques, for the ones who don't know, he's been living in Ethiopia for many years. He's been he knows Ethiopia as well as he knows France, I guess. And I guess, Jacques, you can see right now that there is changes in terms of what is a natural coffee. The conception of natural coffee, as Emilio explained, used to be you pick the coffee from the tree and basically you dry it, but the market or the consumption is really competitive right now. And there is different ways to dry coffee with the shell. At least here in our laboratory in France, we receive like anaerobic fermentation natural, traditional natural. Yesterday, we were copying a coffee from Costa Rica that is named terbic natural, but we are still trying to understand what is it. How is happening in Ethiopia right now, according to your reality?
So, hello, everybody. So just what I can say is I agree with Emilio. Myself, when I started like 15 years ago in coffee in Ethiopia, the good coffees were the washed and the bad coffees, the naturals. So meaning most of the coffee were exported as grade 2 for the washed and grade 4 for the naturals. So we had this idea that the natural is not a good coffee for the industry, and the washed, the high quality coffees for the specialty market. And then it has changed slowly because everybody starts to realize you can make a very good natural, you can make high quality coffees, and also here we have some specific thing, the weather. During coffee harvest, we are in the middle of dry season, so it makes natural easier than some other countries. So we have this combination of specialty coffee growing, good weather, good also what I would say for the naturals, it's easy to do. You don't need a huge machinery, you don't need power, you just need the cherries and a drying bed. So in an Ethiopian context, make it easier than most. And slowly we have seen from many places naturals growing, and especially the Bujis. We have seen naturals in Cafés, which was the last, I would say the last borders. And so because I think in Ethiopia, it's the weather allow you to make very good naturals. At the beginning, the producer, they didn't look to the new, I would say the new natural processes like the anaerobic fermentation, some honey process. But it's changing, and actually this year we did a lot of anaerobic, very nice from Sidama region, and you can see it from not only from us but from the world market. And we have seen a lot of experiments, and which is good because we get year after year more experience, more. And one thing I would like to underline also is we heard at the beginning, like I remember like 5-6 years ago, even recently, you feel the natural process in a cup, but you never heard anybody saying I feel the wash process, because it was like the subconscious, like good coffee is washed, so this is the true profile of the coffee, which is not true. And then slowly with the new process, with the rise of naturals, we start to change the idea and we start to accept new processes. And then I think now the anaerobic fermentation in Ethiopia, we have seen a huge progress, I would say, because the best coffee we bought this year was anaerobic. So very interesting. We keep the profile. We have this fermented profile, of course, but we keep all the complexity of the coffees, the acidity, the sweetness, everything is there. And I would like to say maybe at the end, the Asian market help us a lot to make this progress, because they like the fermented food. So it's a combination of, usually the norms are made in the north, and the source is producing and applies these norms. And I would say maybe it's changing a bit because, because of this new processes.
This will go for Estela. Right now we have a definition, what is a natural process. Later we're going to speak about how good could be this environmentally. But both Emilio and Jacques, they mentioned something which is like to dry natural coffee under certain conditions of weather, that they are quite, El Salvador and Ethiopia is quite similar. I know both countries, and I know that it's dry during the picking season. Is the same for you? Is dry in your area in Panama? You dry the coffee like in an open air space, or do you need to roof your coffees? How is to dry a coffee in a natural process for you?
Well, it's challenging all the time because we start outdoors, and in a harvest season, we have like 3 months with some difficult weather conditions. And then after sometimes we put the coffee in drying beds on greenhouses because of the rain.
Because you have rain during the picking season, right?
Yes, it's not dry at all. It's very humid, especially where the farm is located, since it's surrounded by the volcanic soils, and it's like a lot of trees and all of that. So we have a lot of rain and a lot of humidity. So we try to dry it out as much as we can, and then once we cannot do it because of the conditions, we move it to greenhouses. Yeah.
David, does that sound familiar to you, that complexity of drying coffees under the rain?
Yeah, it's very similar to us here in Kenya. In our area, when we do the processing of our coffee during harvest, it's very rainy, very humid. So it's a challenge, and I think that's why it's not very common to hear a natural process from Kenya that has been done correctly. So we have learned of ways to keep turning and keep the coffee fresh because of the climate, but also to cover the coffee, to protect it from the rain.
So I guess for the ones who don't know, like to have rain during drying processes in a country like El Salvador, that would be a disaster. I mean, it means like you need to have huge amount of reactions. Sometimes you don't have enough people or machines to react when the rain comes. It means like you never want the water to come back to your coffee, right? You are dehydrating coffee. So in the what we saw with David, I was with him this year in Kenya, is like when a producer don't know how to react, it's actually the risk of have mushrooms. It's very high in coffee in general, but let's say in natural process specifically, that's what we saw. When the practices are not good, the risk of have damage is quite very high when you are drying coffee under these conditions. And I remember in your farm this year, Emilio, that you mentioned something about it, that it rains during drying season and during.
Climate has always been changing. And it's a cycle of years that for the last couple of years, at least in this country, October and November were typically when the rainy season finished completely. So November, as far as I remember back, we would get a couple of rains, but never like still rainy season. This few years, October and November have been very wet. So yes, and typically also for us in our processing, we have a medium-sized operation. So for us, the early and the last part of the season is when we used to do our naturals, because that's when we have more space in our patios and dryers. You don't want to be doing naturals in the peak of harvest, because if you get one rain or if you get something, a hiccup, you're pretty much in a problem. So we try to do our naturals early and the end. But in the last 2 years, we've had rain in those, in October and November. So we have been forced to move a lot of the naturals to the end of the harvest. But probably what you're referring to is, yes, sometimes, El Salvador again in Ethiopia and Brazil is similar to that weather, where during harvest, you just don't have rain. And if you do, it's only once or twice or 3 times maximum during the harvest. But again, this last few years, November has been very wet, just 1 full week of rain, and you're stuck with a lot of picking up, to do. So fortunately, there are options. And sometimes those options are, to dry it mechanically directly from the depulping or from the dryers.
I'm putting out this topic because we can speak about natural coffee, and that's great. But here at Belco, here in the coffee industry, here in the coffee world right now, we are not only speaking about natural coffee, we are speaking about high quality natural coffee. Right, which means that, and I remember Cup of Excellence in El Salvador in the first years, they were not so open to naturals, for example. The palate of people change, is really exigent. And right now, what we consider natural coffee, yes, it's a fruity coffee. It could be floral, it could be citric, it could be in many aspects complex, but it has to be clean. So if you don't dry it well, it's not going to be a clean coffee. There is many naturals that they are not clean. So to have a really high natural coffee is actually really complicated. It needs a lot of attention. So I would like to ask everybody, what do you think are the main problems why drying natural coffee? If you want to start, Jack, what you can see is the main problems that people will have in Ethiopia, and maybe we can speak to put it positive at the same time, the solutions of that problem.
The main problem you have is the space. I would say you need enough space to have enough bed in order to not to make too much cherries on bed, you know, because the key is to make a single layer of everything, you know. So you need enough bed, you need space, and the second parameter I'd say is you need a good cherry selection, you know. And that's why in Ethiopia they are using for the specialty coffee the second picking, not the first, not the last, in order to, so yeah, this is the second problem. And the problem you can face when you don't have enough beds is you can put too much cherries per bed. You can have ununiform drying. You can have, and then you start to develop mold, fermented taste, stinker. Yeah. So, and then yeah, and then you need a lot of workers, because you need to pick the cherries from the bed. You need to float the cherry first, of course, and then you need to sort from the bed, removing the green or the immatures or the overripe, and you need to turn the cherries carefully, and yeah, and then it takes a lot of time, like 3 weeks, between 15 days and 20 days. So that means it will increase the risk, because instead of 8 or to 10 days, you of course, if you dry longer, you will increase the risk to have some problem, you know. So you can destroy the whole batch at the 17 or 18 days at the last, and then you will destroy everything, all the work, 2 weeks work. So this is also very frustrating. But yeah.
What about you, David? Is your second year drying coffee in a natural process? According to your experience, will be the most complicated part, or what is your learning experience about natural coffee?
Yeah, the most complicated part, of course, is the space. But something else I also discovered during the process is when you speak of natural process, you first of all you want to fully eliminate the use of water. So we literally did that here in Kenya. We weren't floating. We were not using any water. So that I came to realize that we spent too much space. We used too many bags, too much storage, and at the mill, the machine now would spend much more time than we'd have spent if we had floated the cherries at the farm. So that's something I've learned, and as a solution for us, maybe for this year and the coming years, is I think we may use a small amount of water just for floating that, and the fresh water that may easily be recycled.
Estela?
So, for us, it's the space, but mostly trying to get the coffee to 11% in humidity, just because. So in Panama, we have summer throughout December, January, but normally we start our harvest in January. So it's at the end of summer and beginning of rainy season. So it's very challenging trying to obtain that 11%
By drying beds.
by drying beds.
Emilio, just going to ask you again the same question. Maybe I'm going to type something, because I know you float your coffee and you have a decimeter of cherries before you put the coffee in patios or in drying beds. Have you ever measured the consumption of water that you are using for this process? how different will be in terms of use this water for wash coffees. And one more question is what impact it has to use water in cup profile in terms of not floated at all.
So let's first remember that, you know, when you're picking coffee, even if you try to be very selective and if you try to be pretty clean as a picker, there's still, you know, coffee is constantly releasing mucilage, and that, you know, with the soil and with leaves and sticks and stones and rocks and different things that are in the farm, the coffee pretty much is dirty. So, and it's fermenting, you know, so there are certain things that preferably you need to rinse out. When we say wash, yes, we're washing, but at the same time, you know, let's think about it as rinsing, but also removing some of the foreign matter, you know, again, dirt or, you know, fermented mucilage, etc. And then removing the floaters. The thing about the floaters is that, you know, I would say there are two types of floaters. There are the dried pods. That is a floater that just did not develop the seed well, and it just floats. And that, if you have it in your, well, and then the floater that has one seed that is hollow or empty and the other seed full. So there's two kinds of floaters again. The thing about the floaters is that, let's say a mound form bean that is smaller and it is dry on the pod, let's say that is almost 10%. Sometimes floaters, if you measure the percentage of floaters with your first quality cherry, that's almost 10% sometimes even more, the coffee that floats. That coffee is not gonna dry as exactly the same as the other coffee that is fully formed. That means, remember that when you take a sample and you measure the humidity, what you're getting is a percentage of moisture, you know, content. Some beans will be very dry and some beans will be like, let's say if you have 10% of beans already, you know, kind of dry from the tree, those are gonna be like 5% moisture content, whereas the other 90 or 80% is gonna be like 15% or 14. So, you know, by removing the floaters, you will have a much more even drying of all the beans. Going to your question about what result will you have in the cup or in the profile, at least in our case, you have a much cleaner cup if you remove the floaters and the dirt and all the things that come with the coffee. And the other important thing is that when you roast the coffee, when you see the beans, it's gonna be a much even roast, a much better roast, because again, you have pretty even moisture content. If you keep the floaters in your coffee, it's not gonna roast even. And it's not, well, it's not gonna dry evenly and it's not gonna roast evenly in the roaster.
I wanted to just to change a little bit the question. It's like, okay, we are talking right now as assuming that if you are a farmer, as you are, you have clean water. Very important. If you don't have clean water, it could be a negative aspect. You have a way to use this water after certain process in coffee. That means like you need a place to put this water after you use it. What happens if you don't have water? What will be your thoughts about it? And maybe we will move this question to the others also. Because I don't know if the other ones have also clean water in their farms.
If you have enough labor, you could do a pre-cleaning at the picking. You know, when you are at the end of the day, when you're sorting on the ground, as we do in some countries, you could remove some of those dry pods from the coffee and try to leave it as clean as possible, or screen it. You can screen coffee. There are certain rotary screens that could remove some of those beans that are dry. So mechanically instead of with water.
Yeah. What about you, Estela? Did you float your natural coffee, or you select by hand, or what is the?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We clean first with water. We also have a lot of waterfalls. How you say that?
It's not
Natural
waterfall, but it's ojos de agua.
ojos de agua. I have a lot of
spring waters. Yeah, spring.
Spring waters.
spring waters. I have a lot of them at the farm. So we use that water to clean first and float and then put in drying beds when it's just clean, just a good grape harvest.
And David, you already mentioned that you think you can save some of the work basically by floating the coffee. So do you think it's sustainable in Kenya? Like basically most of the producers will have clean water available, and that would be the question.
Yeah, but I don't think all producers could have fresh water for readily available. So for us, I think the advantage was that if you sort the coffees and remove whatever looks off on the raised beds, when the coffee is fresh, you're able to do much more cleaning than, of course, with a lot of labor. But I think floating can save much more, especially on space, because I noticed our main issue was more on space. Yeah.
What about you, Jack? There is like entire regions in Ethiopia that they are famous for their natural coffees. Did you see people floating coffee, or still hand selection? What is the tendency? What is going on there?
To be honest, there are very few to float the cherries. Because mainly, I think because it's a lack of knowledge, I think. And also because when you float coffee, you can have the sensation to lose some good cherries, because of course you have red cherries floating, and then you don't understand why do you have to remove those cherries. So this is one of the work we do here, the staff of Fufa, Chambrillon, Fontanesh, when we do training, when we visit our supplier, we try to make them floating the cherries. You have some farmer who does it, like there is Dukale Wakayo in Sidama who does it. You have people like Mustafa Mohamed Ali, he float the cherries. Khalid Shifa, he float also. But because we made a lot of training, a lot of talk to get to these results. And then again, the problem, like you said, is the water available. So it's a problem, because the good thing with natural is you use less water. So ideally, you should be totally dry the process, but still it's less water.
There is a person who is asking, and I'm going to jump in the question because it's just so connected to the conversation. He says, hello to all. Thanks so much for interesting talk. Quick question. Have you ever measured the difference of cost on doing natural versus wash coffees? This is saving money or not? Who wants to take the answer? If you ever measured the difference between wash and natural, the cost?
Just what I can say is it's a cost of a different nature. Like I said, in natural you invest more in human cost, like workers and skills. You know, meaning you have to train your people to have the good attitude. So you have cost, and then for the wash, you invest in infrastructure. You need fermentation tanks. You need a pulping machine. You need washing channels. You need power. You need many things. So I'm not sure the cost is depend of your the advantage you have. If you have a lot of space, if you have a lot of wood to build the beds, or you know, it will be depend of also your advantage, your situation.
Yeah.
Sorry, César, just to add a few points on the natural process. For example, you don't need too much power like the one you need for washing. You need a lot of investment, like investment cost is higher in the washing process and other process, but the natural is only the operational cost. Like as Jacques said, you need to have very efficient and well-skilled laborers who can easily sort out your coffees under control and the raking and others on the drying tables.
Emilio, you want to add something?
Sure. So in our case, we have an operation that has both options. You just turn a lever and you decide if you want to do naturals or fully washed or washed. In our case, the cost of processing coffee from the washing or from the rinsing of the fruit till the export, when it's natural, is double the cost. So the cost of a parchment coffee fully washed is about 35 to 40 cents per pound to process it from the depulping to the exporting. You know, it's about 35 to 40 cents. Natural is double the time of drying, double the amount of people that you need to turn it around, double the time of hauling, double the time of cleaning and sorting. It's double the time. To have both operations running exactly at, you know, really next to each other. And the other thing that I wanted to add, yes, it is double the cost, but when you rinse coffee with water, the usage of water, it drops to, so in our case, we have a mechanical siphon that holds 1.5 cubic meters. We're only using 25 liters of coffee per ton of cherry.
I'm sorry, the last data is
23 liters of water per ton of fruit. That's it.
yeah, so it's pretty low.
It's almost 15 times more when we use the depulping.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very interesting because we have some people actually leaving some commentaries, and people is speaking about guardiolas, for example, which is dryers, basically, mechanical dryers for coffee. Doesn't need to be guardiolas. There is many ways to do it, but how many producers, for example, they can buy or get access to a dryer? I mean, again, natural coffee, it seems to be easy, but actually it's complicated because it needs, I'm not saying the wash coffee needs less attention, but it just needs a lot of attention to produce a high quality natural coffee. I don't know if for everybody is the same or everybody measured already, but okay, the cost is higher. So that means that it will be more logical to do a natural coffee when you visualize the quality you can get, right? Because it has to have a reward, all this work. There is no point to do a complicated process to get the same money of another process that is easier. In the case of Emilio, for example, he has two the two options. Do everybody agree that a natural coffee should be, let's say we speak about high quality natural coffee, that should be logically more expensive, or I'm taking Emilio's words in a wrong way? What did everybody think? Like David, for example, or Estela, what do you think?
I think for us, being smaller producers, the initial cost of setup, if you use the natural process, you skip that, the machinery, the whole building a washing station. I think you bypass a lot of costs, to my opinion, and you save much more on water, because here in Kenya, our machines, the pulpers use 7 liters of water per kilo. That's a lot of water to use, especially for the micro estates.
Mm-hmm. This is when you wash coffees.
That's when you wash coffee. But
okay.
I think for natural, for us, for smaller, for the micro estates, I think we could spend on labor, but it's a positive spend. It's not something to, there's a reward for it towards the end, when because the coffee, number one, is very special. It's highly marketable.
Estela.
Okay, for us it's higher cost because of the naturals is higher cost because of the workforce, and also because of the climate that we usually have like 8 to 20 Celsius temperatures, so it's cold weather. So to get 11% humidity, we need to take, longer time, and we need to use a lot of workforce to see the coffee, to turn around and all that stuff. But naturals are just my favorite ones.
Yeah, it's funny that you say the naturals are your favorite, because here in France we can still talk to people who get surprised. I mean, a lot of people think they don't like naturals, but they just never drink a high quality natural coffee. Not here in France. I mean, everywhere in the world, even in our countries that we produce these coffees. However, there is always this different. It's not just natural coffee; it's high quality natural coffee. That means like altitude from the ocean level, varietal, maturity, drying technique, etc., etc. Everything must be perfect, basically, right? I have a question here, which a person is asking. It's in French. Let me see. It's related to anaerobic fermentation, which is something new for everybody, I guess. This person wants me to ask for the definition of anaerobic fermentation. If somebody wants to take it. I know that Emilio was doing anaerobic fermentation. I know that David also.
Yeah, me too.
You too, right?
Yeah,
so
yes.
it will be.
It's the leak of oxygen, and you put the beans on a tank, and then usually, if you want, you can put CO2 to the tank. That way it's a carbonic maceration. And usually we put, ¿cómo se dice una manguera?
We put a pipe out of the tank to take out the
oxygen and all the CO. Yeah, that's the way we do that.
Yeah, so during these years, I've been watching or experimenting this process, and a lot of the time, actually, the part when the coffee rests under pressure is in cherry, right?
Yes.
How do you call this process? because in the end of the day, it will be dried with cherry, but it's not fully natural, right? How you do define this process?
I see.
You call it natural.
We call ESD,
Mm-hmm.
anaerobic slow dry, that way. Yeah, but we also do wash anaerobic process too. Mm-hmm. Both of them.
Okay. Emilio, how do you call this in El Salvador?
Just anaerobic or carbonic maceration as well.
Okay.
And just to add to what Estela said, pretty much the thing about removing oxygen or adding CO2 to remove the oxygen, what that prevents pretty much is creating, there are bacteria and yeast that depend on oxygen to live or to procreate. So there are a lot of off flavors that need or that develop by having these oxygens. So you would control, in a way, what you're trying to do in the end is control the natural process. What sometimes comes out of that is intense flavors. You're intensifying some of the flavors that otherwise you could have a very smooth natural. With some of these new processes, what you are doing pretty much is intensifying some flavors, whether they're good or bad, or whether a lot of people like them or not. You are controlling your fermentation, but then you're adding new flavors.
Yeah, it's a different way to do it, basically.
Yeah.
I have another question, also related with the topic, and this is the reason why I'm doing it. The question is, I am understanding that cost-wise, washed versus natural will be more or less expensive depending on the country and the context. That said, can we aim to a more eco-friendly stage by doing natural or not, from your experience? And maybe I will add why. And maybe it's a question that everybody can take. Jack, you want to start?
Yeah. It's not so easy to answer that. For sure, it's depend on the context, the country, the asset of each place. Then eco-friendly depend how you work, but I think it's more eco-friendly for sure, because you are using less water, less power, less. But still, you have to build the bed. What else? But yes, I would say it's more eco-friendly. I would say also it's a more soft for the cherry. The natural is very delicate. You pick a cherry, you put on the bed, you don't touch it, but then you have to dry it carefully. So it's a soft process, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's more eco-friendly.
What do you think from your experience in Kenya, David?
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. For sure, the natural process is eco-friendly, because like everyone else said, like Jacques before me, that you don't use power, and you save a lot on water. So even when the process is introduced to, for example, the farmers, when learning about the process, everyone got a light bulb the moment learning that they could process coffee and high quality coffee without having to use as much water as they used to before. For us, it's new, so it's exciting.
Estela?
Sure is more eco-friendly naturals than washed coffee. And we use more workforce. That means to give all that workers more time to be at the farm.
Great. Emilio?
In our case, unlike many other producers, we just do not have water at our place. So even if, you know, this year at least, we did almost 30% of our production was natural. So for us, and that has been growing in the last year. Sometimes it drops, sometimes it goes, but if I were to draw a line, it would start going up, you know, and we, every year we do more. So yes, it is more eco-friendly because again, we just don't have water. And the water we do have, it's rainwater that we collect in big tanks. Yes, it also requires less energy because the whole other part of the mill, well, the pulper, the unripening separator, the tanks of fermentation, everything uses power and investment. So yes, you would be substituting that for labor. But I think the big factor here is risk. You know, we can talk about eco-friendly as well, and great, yes, eco-friendly. It's the reality. That's what it is. We're using less resources, natural resources, to process the coffee. That is at a cost because, you know, again, it takes twice as long. But the risk factor is very important in our case, and I think it's the case for many of us that need to move the coffee indoor. So yes, we will use less power and less things, but we need to build houses, greenhouses. We need to build more beds. We need to, you know, we need to go and remove more bamboo or plant more bamboo, whatever we're using as wood. So I think it's, yes, it is, but it's also risky, and that brings a cost. So there are different things. And yes, it improves quality in most of the time.
It's a different complication, right?
I'd like to add one thing. The wash coffee is also, it could be a source of pollution for the whole community here in Ethiopia. Because if the washing station release water with mucilage in the river, that means it will pollute the water, the river, and the river is a source of life. You know, people, they go there for the cattle, you know, to make them drink. They will use the water of the river to wash the clothes. So if the river is polluted, it's also a problem. It's not only to save the environment, it's also for the community, for the life, for the villages around. It could be, you create less negative externality with a natural than washed. This is for sure. Not only environment, but also toward the community, you know.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like you cannot apply the same formula everywhere, especially different countries, different realities, different source of water, different treatments for the water after the process. Somehow at Belco, we have a sourcing team that the word said sourcing is because you kind of build this relationship with the producers, right? And it means like we go into your house to understand what's going on, to get these like super amazing coffees that from time to time won awards, and the clients love it and the roaster love it, but we kind of have to ensure you without judge you the way that this coffee arrived to France. I mean, it's really complicated just to speak about only about environment, even if it is the most important thing here. It's many factors to have these high quality coffees. I think time is quite, it's important to think in the time right now. And this is again a question for everybody. What do you think, according to your experience in the last years, the future for high quality natural coffee? In Belco, we can tell you, like, not for an idea or for a wish, it's a reality. We can see that there is more interest in, and the people is just more open to consume high quality coffee and of course natural coffee, but you as producers, do you see this future also like better for natural coffees or not necessarily? What is your comments about it? In my screen, Emilio, Estela, David, and Jack, please take that order.
Okay, I think yes, the percentage of of naturals out of the whole pie of consumption of coffee will eventually keep growing, especially of the high-end coffees. I do have one comment though, like, and it's more of, okay, how do people consume the natural the high-end coffee, the natural coffees? In my case, and most of the people that I know, can't drink more than 1 cup of natural coffee. Whereas a fully washed coffee, chocolate, very rich in caramel, clean, I can drink 10 in a morning. So, and I can never drink myself. I could never drink more than 1 cup of, even if it's the most smooth or the cleanest natural, it's just too much for me. And I think that is sometimes what happens in general to people that just don't get too excited about naturals. It's just sometimes it's too overpowering. So yes, there is a lot of room to grow and a lot of room in the market to accept naturals. And I think the thing about the super high-end naturals is that you're gonna do a pour over, not an espresso. Espresso and single serve, I think there's a lot of room there to add a percentage of naturals to your blends. Mm-hmm. But a single cup of really high-end natural, in my case, I cannot drink more than 1. So, and I think a lot of people share that same thing. But again, percentage of blends, let's keep growing them. And, it's a great component of espresso, gives a lot of crema, gives a lot of texture, gives a lot of sweetness to your espresso. And that is where I think I see a lot of potential. And that's just my opinion.
Of course. Estela.
Well, since I love natural coffee, I can tell that I can drink a lot of cups of natural coffee, not as well as anaerobic coffees, because it's a different type of coffee. You can have a natural cup with high acidity, fruit of flavors, but in the case of ASD, like anaerobic, it's different. And I think that natural coffee consumption is going up every time. And since I participate in Best of Panama, I've been doing more natural coffee, like 20% more for my each year for my clients, because it takes a lot of time to get a good one. I mean, a really quality one, and I think it's growing up every year, the consumption of natural coffees. In my case.
Thank you, David. What do you think about it?
Yeah, in our case, I think here in our country, we just started in naturals, and we still have much more to learn, much more to try and give to the market out there. So for us, I think the natural market is going to grow. Also, of course, on the environmental side, like Jacques said, that if you see it's a sensitive topic, but if you look at in our country, there's a study going on the amount of what do I call it, cancerous cases in our country. Most of them are closer to the farms, and that's because of the extensive use of chemicals and things like that.
You're speaking about cancer, sorry?
Yeah.
Okay.
and you find it's reduced in the cities and much more closer to the farms. So if we keep using water in our country, I think there's a positive side to not use water, because the whole community will gain from it in very many ways. More than just cost, more than just the environment, even health-wise. So for us to continue producing natural coffees, I think is a plus for us.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I agree with Estela. I think the test is changing. So, and when we see from here, because every year, not this year, but we receive a lot of roasters. And during the cupping, the higher score are always for the naturals. So I think the test is changing, which is normal because the product is changing. So I'm quite optimistic to see this market growing a lot. And it has to grow because it's better for the community at origin, it's better for the environment. And I think it's a good thing.
And again, I would like to put again a little opinion by saying, like, when we speak about natural or wash or anaerobic, yes, these are process or honey or whatever process we may think, the process is there, but the high quality, it depends of so many factors. That process is one very important factor, but not the main factor. In terms of natural process, it used to be considered, at least in Central America, when I grew up in a productive environment, not the best flavor. It's been changing, and people has been accepting this fermented, delicious, fruity flavor of high quality naturals. And what I see is more people open their minds and their paladars to drink this type of coffee. In terms of consumption, we can see growing. We are selling more at Belco. We are for sure sourcing more natural coffee. So it seems to be positive for natural processed coffee. From my side, I want to thank everybody. I know that everybody stops their regular day to be here in this talk. Maybe we can give a little bit reflection of what we spoke about it as a goodbye. It's Emilio, you want to start?
I think the market, just like the weather, it's going to be changing, and just we need to be ready for it. Let's hope natural coffees are not a trend, and let's hope the high-end natural coffees, let's hope we just have them for a while, because yes, it is better for the environment, better for just the processing itself, and I think again, but we need to be ready to change. This is only, let's think about the coffee industry as we know it, existing for 200 years. It's only been 15 years since we started to talk about this. So that's not, it's very short term. In the next 5 years, we could be talking a whole different conversation around a new process or a new thing. So let's not only keep thinking that, yes, this is here to stay. And let's hope that this is the beginning of something else. And that we could soon also be doing eco-friendly or more eco-friendly wash coffees, because just to have the whole process being more eco-friendly, that is a true benefit. Instead of just saying, okay, let's move only to naturals. The coffee industry is so complex and so big and so exciting and so new, and it's going to keep changing. So, that's my little 2 cents of what we I think, and let's just hope that we're moving into a more clean and more complex and keeps going that way environment.
Thank you, Emilio. Estela, I really want to thank you for being here. I know that you are not in your country right now. I know that it's also new for you, as it's the first year that we have a commercial relationship with you. Of course, we
I
really
want to
hope this is.
thank-
Please,
Yes.
please go.
I want to thank Belco for being part of this conversation, and it's an honor to be here. And for me, it's a challenge to every year have the opportunity to offer my coffee. And I think we are moving coffee forward in terms of natural coffee. I think the brewers, world coffees are the baristas are helping this industry to go forward, and every time moving our coffee in a higher level. So that is very important for us.
And we also want to add that we couldn't agree more with Emilio when he talked about how we want these to stay as natural coffees, not to stay, but to move forward and keep people very interesting when it comes to natural coffees. And as my mom said, we think baristas are really helping now when it comes to young people really trying specialty coffees and trying to get more into the industry and trying out coffees all over the world. I think it's very important. And for us as, new producers, we're very proud to be here today and just to get as much knowledge as we can and share what we know. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, I know that is your second year processing natural coffees. I think your feedback is really interesting as you come from Kenya, a country with a huge tradition of wash or double wash coffees. What are your thoughts about the talk? And really welcome to, really interesting to hear you.
Yeah, thank you to you, Cesar, for having me, and thank you to Belco for working with us actually for the second year. For the conversation on the naturals, for me, I think it's a learning curve for us, because for us, we just started. So I'm going to say it again, we just started, and it's a learning curve. We have much more to see what is going to come from this, and focus more on the balance between the washed and the naturals and the eco-friendliness.
Cool.
Thank you.
Jacques, I think we are saying goodbye to this, to all participation. I really want to thank you personally for your work, for your time. You in Addis Abeba, can you please say the official goodbye for the audience of Belco?
You put a lot of pressure on me. No, but yes. So to finish, I would say let's hope we continue to discover, like Emilio said, it's a young industry, so let's hope we continue to discover new profile, new way to work in a better, more eco-friendly, more respecting the people producing the coffee, and then making a better link between the final consumer, the roasters, the producers, just to make everybody aware that we belong to the same world. So we all have to benefit from that. So I think it's a good way to finish and to say goodbye.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you for your amazing coffees and for your time.
Thank
Thank you, Belco. Thanks, Cesar.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.